Welcome to Infinite Universe with interesting episode. In the year 1531, a map was created that showed something very surprising. If you look closely, you'll see that this old map clearly shows the continent of Antarctica. But what makes this so strange is that Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until the year 1820. That's almost 300 years later. Even more puzzling is the fact that this map doesn't just show Antarctica, it shows it without any ice, with clear details of its coastline. Today, Antarctica is completely covered in thick ice, but the version on the map seems to be of a time when there was no ice at all. This leads to a serious question: how did someone from 1531 know what Antarctica looked like without ice, when modern humans didn't even know the continent existed? This mystery isn't just about one map. Antarctica appears on several ancient maps, all drawn with such accuracy that experts today are still amazed. One of the most interesting things about this discovery is that it challenges what we believe about ancient civilizations. It raises questions about who really knew what, and when. During a podcast conversation between Joe Rogan and researcher Graham Hancock, this topic came up, and it shocked many listeners. Hancock pointed out that if Antarctica shows up on these old maps before it was discovered, and especially if it's shown without ice, then it means someone must have had a very advanced understanding of the world a long time ago. They must have been able to explore faraway places, study their landscapes, and draw them with precise detail. But there's more. These discoveries about ancient maps are now being connected with recent studies about ancient people and their DNA. Scientists found genetic similarities between some tribes living in the Amazon rainforest and the people of Melanesia and Papua New Guinea. That's extremely far apart, on completely different sides of the Earth. These island people were some of the first known to reach far corners of the planet. So how did people from the Amazon and those from Pacific Islands share DNA? This deepens the mystery. It suggests that long ago, there may have been a civilization that traveled great distances, settled in different places, and then vanished, leaving only traces behind. Graham Hancock believes this wasn't just a small historical coincidence. He thinks this could have been a global event that changed everything. According to him, history as we know it might be missing a huge piece. He says what we learn in schools is only part of the real story. He believes that an ancient, advanced civilization once existed, and that it had knowledge, technology, and navigation skills that we usually associate with much more recent times. When people today think about the first explorers in human history, they often think of the Polynesians. These people were known for traveling across the Pacific Ocean, settling on islands as far apart as Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. They did this around 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. Historians and archaeologists say this was the first great journey across the seas. The Polynesians used the stars, ocean currents, and winds to guide their way. They could sail for thousands of kilometers with amazing accuracy, even though they had no modern tools like compasses or maps. Their journeys were not accidents. These were planned, precise explorations made by skilled navigators who knew how to read the signs of nature. And because of their success, the Polynesians are honored in history books as the first true explorers of the open seas. But according to Graham Hancock, there might have been others who came before them, people from a much older and forgotten civilization that was capable of even greater feats. He believes that around 12,800 years ago, there was a civilization that may have traveled even further, perhaps even to Antarctica. These people, he suggests, had the ability to build ships and explore the oceans. They might have mapped the Earth long before any modern civilization was born. If that is true, it would change everything we thought we knew about the history of exploration and human development. Our first clues about this lost civilization come from maps that were created in the 15th and 16th centuries. During this time, ancient maps began to appear in Europe and the Middle East. These maps were often copied from even older source materials, passed down through different cultures and generations. Some of these maps belong to a category called portolanos. These were navigation charts used by sailors. They suddenly appeared in large numbers after the Crusades, especially after the sacking of Constantinople, where many ancient documents were taken. What's strange is that these maps show land and coastlines that should have been unknown at the time. For example, some of them show parts of Antarctica with incredible accuracy, and even show the land as it was during the last ice age, when much of the Earth's water was frozen and sea levels were much lower. Lands that are now underwater were above sea level then, and these maps show those areas clearly. They also show regions like Indonesia and Malaysia as a single landmass, which was true only during the last ice age, around 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. That raises a big question. How did the people who drew these maps know what Earth looked like during the ice age? According to historians, those areas had not been discovered or mapped until centuries later. Yet, these old maps show them with a level of detail that would have required advanced tools and knowledge. Many of the people who created these maps said they based them on older maps, which they had copied or inherited. These source maps may have come from a civilization that had the ability to view the world from above, as if they had a bird's-eye view of the land. This suggests a level of scientific and geographical understanding far beyond what we usually associate with ancient times. If such a civilization really existed, then it must have had the tools, organization, and curiosity to map the planet with precision. But if they existed, what happened to them? There is a theory that a global disaster, now known as the Younger Dryas event, wiped them out. This event is believed to have been caused by the impact of a massive comet that exploded in the Earth's atmosphere about 12,800 years ago. The explosion caused massive fires, floods, and climate changes around the world. It marked the beginning of a sudden return to Ice Age conditions that lasted for about 1,200 years. The impact of the Younger Dryas was devastating. In North America alone, about 70% of large land animals, including mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, went extinct. The event also caused widespread destruction across other continents. Entire ecosystems collapsed, and any civilization that existed before it would have been seriously affected or completely destroyed. Interestingly, stories of massive floods, fire from the sky, and global destruction appear in myths and religious texts from many cultures. In ancient Egypt, India, the Middle East, and the Americas, there are stories that describe events similar to the Younger Dryas. One of the most famous is the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible, where a great flood wipes out most of humanity. While many see these as symbolic or religious stories, Graham Hancock and others believe they might actually be memories of real events passed down over generations. According to this idea, the great flood myths from around the world are all talking about the same thing, a real event that changed the course of human history. If that's true, then human civilization might be much older than we think, and our ancestors might have been more advanced than we give them credit for. One of the most famous ancient maps that support this idea is the Piri Reis map. It was drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis. Today, only part of the map survives, but what remains is enough to amaze and confuse experts. It shows parts of South America and Africa with surprising accuracy, and it also shows a landmass at the bottom of the map that appears to be Antarctica, but again, without ice. Piri Reis himself wrote that he used older source maps to create his map. These sources, he said, came from the ancient library of Alexandria, which was one of the largest and most important centers of knowledge in the ancient world. The library was destroyed many centuries ago, but before that, it housed thousands of texts, maps, and documents from all over the known world. Some of those documents survived and made their way to other parts of the world, including Constantinople. That's where Piri Reis likely found them. If these source maps really came from the Library of Alexandria, and if they really did show what the Earth looked like during the Ice Age, then that means the knowledge of this ancient civilization survived much longer than the civilization itself. It was passed down, copied, and preserved, even if the original creators were forgotten. This theory changes how we see history. It suggests that instead of human knowledge slowly increasing over time, there may have been periods of great knowledge and ability, followed by sudden collapses and long periods of forgetting. In other words, history might not be a straight line upward, but more like a wave rising and falling with each global event. The idea of a lost civilization with advanced knowledge is not new, but discoveries like ancient maps, unexplained DNA links, and mysterious ruins keep the idea alive. Modern science continues to find evidence that doesn't fit neatly into the official timeline of human history. As more of this evidence comes to light, people are beginning to ask serious questions about what really happened in our past. What if this lost civilization left more behind than just maps and stories? What if there are ruins buried beneath the ice of Antarctica or deep within the jungles that could finally prove their existence? As satellite technology, ground-penetrating radar, and underwater scanning methods improve, researchers are starting to uncover strange structures that don't fit into the known history of mankind. Could these be the remnants of the ancient world Hancock believes in? Or are they something else entirely? In the next part, we'll explore the strange ruins, unexplained technologies, and mysterious sites across the globe that may be the final clues left behind by an ancient people lost to time. There are many mysterious old maps that show things they should not be able to show. The most famous example is the Piri Reis map. But he wasn't the only one. Many other maps from that same time period also show Antarctica in exactly the right place. This is strange because Antarctica wasn't even officially discovered until centuries later. Yet somehow, these old maps seem to show it clearly and accurately. They even show details that match the actual geography of Antarctica, not as it looks today under ice, but how it might have looked thousands of years ago during the last ice age when it was ice-free. These maps seem to hint that someone in ancient times already had the knowledge to chart coastlines that we didn't even know existed until modern times. These maps may have been copied over and over again by different people across the centuries. But the question remains, who made the original ones? Where did that information come from? One of the biggest clues that something is off comes from how they managed to draw coastlines with such accuracy. To do that, you have to know both latitude and longitude. Measuring latitude isn't too hard. Many ancient civilizations could do that by watching the sun and stars. But longitude is a different story. It requires knowing the exact time at your location and comparing it to a reference point. This was very hard to do before the invention of the marine chronometer. Until 1735, explorers had a hard time figuring out their exact position at sea. Many ships got lost or crashed because they didn't have the right tools. Then, John Harrison created the marine chronometer, and it changed everything. Suddenly, people could sail the world more safely and accurately. But here's the mystery: those old maps, like the Piri Reis chart and the Portolano projections, already showed accurate longitude data. The continents are placed correctly in relation to each other. This shouldn't have been possible. So the options are either that these mapmakers made lucky guesses, or they had access to much older sources that already had this information. If ancient people really understood how to calculate longitude thousands of years before we thought it was possible, then that would change our entire understanding of history. It would mean that someone had already figured this out, possibly back when mammoths still walked the earth. And if people like Piri Reis were just copying older sources, then we have to ask, who created the original maps, and how did they know so much about the world so long ago? In 1818, a detailed world map called the Pinkerton map was published. This map was based on all the best navigation information available at the time. But there's one thing it didn't show: Antarctica. That's because, in 1818, Antarctica hadn't been officially discovered yet. So the bottom part of the map is just blank. Now here's where things get even stranger. Much older maps from centuries before actually do show Antarctica. And they don't just show a random shape, they show Antarctica in the right spot. Some of these maps even show it without its ice sheet, meaning the land underneath. That means the maps might show what Antarctica looked like during the last ice age, thousands of years ago. This is not just a strange coincidence or a mistake. It's a real contradiction. If Antarctica was still unknown in 1818, how could people from centuries earlier draw it correctly? The only answer that makes sense is that someone must have seen it. They must have traveled there by boat, looked at it when it wasn't covered in ice, and mapped it. And then those maps were passed down, copied by later mapmakers who didn't even know what they were really showing. Our journey to solve this mystery continues in North America. For many years, historians believed that the Clovis culture was the first group of humans to settle in the Americas. These people were hunters and gatherers, and they appeared around 13,400 years ago. They used tools made of stone and hunted big animals. Then, they disappeared from the record around 12,600 years ago. For a long time, it was believed that nobody had come to the Americas before them. But new discoveries have challenged that idea. In one dig site, archaeologists found a thick layer of soil with no human activity. But underneath that layer, they found human tools and other signs of life. When they dated the items, they found out that people had been living there more than 50,000 years ago. That's way earlier than the Clovis people. This discovery completely changes what we thought we knew about human history in the Americas. The mystery gets even deeper in the Amazon rainforest. Scientists studying isolated tribes found something they didn't expect. The DNA of 3 Amazon tribes had a genetic marker that was only found in people from a region far away, Australasia, which includes places like Australia and nearby islands. This doesn't make sense if humans only came to the Americas 13,000 years ago by walking across the Bering Land Bridge. How did genes from Australasia end up in the Amazon? These tribes had never had contact with the outside world. This suggests that people were making long sea journeys across oceans long before we thought it was possible. If their genes could travel so far, maybe the people themselves did too. It raises the possibility that an ancient civilization existed with the ability to travel across vast oceans. We already know the ancient Egyptians built boats. Archaeologists have found boats over 4,000 years old, beautifully made. But for some reason, historians think the Egyptians only used them to travel the Nile River. Why do we assume that? If they had boats and the skill to use them, why wouldn't they explore further? Maybe they did, and we just haven't found enough proof yet. Hancock asks a simple question: if Egyptians could build strong, reliable boats, why do we assume they didn't use them to explore? Why limit them to local rivers when they had the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean so close by? And it's not just the Egyptians. Other cultures like the Polynesians and the Vikings were great sailors too. History is full of people who knew how to travel by sea. If they could sail rivers, then they could sail seas. And if they could sail seas, maybe they explored much more of the world than we ever imagined. Let's go back to the Amazon rainforest. New technology, like satellite imaging and advanced mapping, has shown that this land isn't untouched wilderness like we used to think. Under the trees, researchers are finding signs of roads, cities, and huge structures. The rainforest was once home to large, organized societies. These people didn't just survive, they built complex civilizations. They shaped the land, built giant earthworks, and even had knowledge of astronomy and math. These societies were far more advanced than we ever gave them credit for. But for some reason, history never accepted them as real civilizations. We always assumed that only hunter-gatherers lived there. Now we know that's not true. The Amazon was home to intelligent people who built cities, studied the stars, and understood their environment. They managed the rainforest in a way that made it better for farming and living. These people created a whole system of living that worked with nature, not against it. It makes you wonder how much of their knowledge was lost when their civilization disappeared. One of the most mysterious places connected to this lost history is called the Bimini Road. It's located underwater near the Bahamas. It's a line of huge flat stones, almost like a road or a collapsed wall. Divers have studied it for years, trying to figure out if it's a natural formation or something man-made. Here's where it gets really interesting. On the Piri Race map, there is an island drawn in the exact same spot. And on that island, there's a row of shapes that look like giant stones, a path that runs through the middle. This matches exactly with where Bimini Road is today. Graham Hancock himself went diving at Bimini Road. He doesn't argue whether it's natural or built by humans. He focuses on something else. On the map, Bimini Road appears above water. But today, it's underwater. That means when the map was originally drawn, sea levels must have been lower. Or, the land might have sunk since then. Either way, it suggests that someone saw Bimini Road when it was still above the water and decided to draw it. This is a powerful clue. It means that someone was exploring and mapping the area long ago, possibly thousands of years before we thought humans had that kind of technology. They were mapping coastlines, building cities, and traveling by sea. They left behind pieces of their legacy: old maps, strange DNA, underwater structures, and mysterious tools. Most of these things don't fit into our current view of history. So instead of changing the story, we usually ignore them. But if we look at all of this together, It tells a story that we can no longer deny. These clues are not just random facts from different parts of the world. They are part of a much bigger picture. They suggest that there was once an advanced civilization during the Ice Age. This civilization knew how to sail the oceans, map the world, and build cities. They may have even had a better understanding of the Earth than we give them credit for. Over time, this civilization vanished. But pieces of their knowledge survived. Some of it ended up in the hands of mapmakers like Piri Reis. Others are buried in libraries, old books, and unexplored places. Graham Hancock believes that we are only just beginning to rediscover this lost chapter of human history. He thinks that if we keep asking questions and keep looking for clues, we might one day understand who these ancient people were. They were not just myths or stories. They were real. And maybe one day, we will be able to continue their work and learn more about our own past. Because our history may be much older, deeper, and more complex than we ever imagined. If you liked this story, there is so much more to discover. More maps, more clues, and more ancient knowledge are still waiting to be found. All we have to do is keep digging, keep reading, and keep asking questions. Because the truth is out there, we just have to be willing to see it. Thanks for watching. Keep it and stay tuned. Like and subscribe our channel. Have a good day.